Okay, so this is a special board meeting of the Needham Housing Authority Board of Commissioners. It's duly noticed several days ago, the town's clerk's office, although there was a snafu I'm going to address in a moment with that. And first thing I'm going to do is call the roll. Reg Foster is here. Other commissioners
here.
Okay.
Ed Scheidler here.
And Eleanor, I think you have to keep yourself on. Don't
Okay.
mute yourself. Okay, so yeah,
Okay.
you got.
Eleanor Evans here.
Okay, so I think we have all five. Janice, did you say you were here?
Yes.
No. Okay, so we have all five commissioners here, and we have a quorum. Before we get in, this meeting is for the purposes of discussing and planning and figuring out next steps, because we received a letter of resignation from our executive director, Angie Medeiros, last Friday afternoon. This is the first time we could meet after that. And thanks to one of the residents, they pointed out that there was an error in posting the meeting notice, even though it was posted on a timely basis. And it was the actual agenda said the right date. It was somehow posted on the Thursday calendar, i.e. tomorrow in the town, as opposed to the Wednesday calendar. When that was brought to our attention this morning, we changed it in the calendar, and Angie also set out a robocall about the mistake that had been made. So I don't quite know where that puts us in some sort of gray area. I think we get to correct mistakes, but obviously it was late. This is an urgent matter to discuss, and so I guess I would be in favor of continuing the agenda as we have it here. If there are objections to our doing this, there's a process for objecting, and that could be something we have to consider. Maybe have the meeting over again next Thursday, or certainly more than 2 days from now. But I want to check with the other commissioners on how they felt about that, because I do feel a sense of urgency to get through this agenda today. So I have a thumbs up. Let's go from Ed, and from Penny, and from Eleanor and Janice. Would you agree too?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. So let's jump in. I also have one item that came in yesterday afternoon out of the blue, although it had been rumored for a while, which is I received a carbon copy of a letter to the CPC chair, Peter Pingator, and it was from the Charles River Center, and it was with respect to our application to the CPC for $1.8 million worth of funds to buy the East Militia Drive property. And although that isn't, technically on this agenda, I am facing going into a CPC meeting tonight where I'm going to be asked about this. And so I'd like to at least bring it up at the end of the meeting for, the sense of the commissioners, or finding out that maybe the commissioners are not ready to provide a sense yet because it's so sudden here and we haven't had a chance to discuss it. So that's what we have our agenda for today. In the posted agenda, there are, it's all about the resignation discussion, the next step. So pretty much anything with respect to that agenda item, broad agenda item, is good for today's discussion. And I've broken it out into 6 items. And this is really from past times when we've had executive director recommendations. So these are sort of 5 of them have to do with the sort of standard steps that one has to take in the situation. And the last one has to do with the impact on the modernization and redevelopment initiative. Again, something that I'm probably going to be asked about tonight at the CPC. Um, so I'm ready. I'm willing to proceed in any way we should. But I did take the initiative to reach out to DHCD on Saturday after receiving the news from Angie, and requesting an urgent telephone call with them. And that urgent telephone call took place this morning around 11 a.m. And it was with our housing management specialist who oversees, all of our day-to-day management operations here at the Housing Authority. And so he gave me some input, which I can report on. And he also said he would email me out the various elements of guidance and DHCD directives and so forth and so on that apply to this situation. And of course, I just received those earlier this afternoon, and I've provided them to the commissioners, but obviously nobody's had much of a time to take a look at it here. So this is where we're at today. I think this is sort of an organizational meeting and to get everybody's ideas and approaches and everything out as much as we can. I'm not sure we can make any kind of final decisions today in terms of go forward strategy, but I think we will make progress. And then I would sort of foresee that we would follow up on whatever questions or action items come out of this meeting today. And then this would obviously be a major topic of on our next week's regular monthly board meeting, which is on March 17th at 7:30. So, people want to just jump in and start discussing things. I mean, people meaning commissioners. Now we can have a little bit of general discussion, and then I can report on what I learned from DHCD. And I can also report on what we have done in this sort of situation in the past and see how it applies to us today. And also want to appropriate time make way of time for resident comments. And because obviously this is an important thing that's going on from their point of view. So does anybody have any opening comments or thoughts they want to share? Go ahead, Ed.
Can all 5 of us be on the selection committee?
No, because every time we meet, it's a posted meeting. And if you go through one of those DHCD guidance documents, the 2021-03, their process is to form a selection committee. It can have commissioners on it, but typically it doesn't have more than 2, because otherwise every time you have a meeting, it becomes a posted meeting situation. And the committee then goes through the process of winnowing down candidates, probably with the help of a search consultant, and then reports their 1 or more finalists to the board, who then interviews the candidates and makes the final decision.
Well, I'd like to be on the selection committee if possible.
Okay, well, that's one of the things we can talk about absolutely today that's on the agenda. So, what we've had in the past for selection committees is usually 2 board members and several residents. And in the past, of course, we were managing the Wellesley Housing Authority. So there was usually somebody that they, appointed to be part of the process.
I'll be glad to sit on that committee.
Okay.
And we need a representative from the local tenant organization. Is that correct?
Yes. Or more than 1 resident, obviously.
Okay.
Is there a limit to the size of the committee?
Nothing specified. The committee does a lot of work. So, even if you're using a search consultant, there's a lot of meetings. You need to make all those meetings, or otherwise it doesn't really work, obviously. And so that's really more the criteria. But the size, I think it's better to have people representing. It's been better they have somebody from each one of the major developments interested enough to put in the elbow grease. And in the past, there hasn't been any member of the town public or anything like that, or a neighbor or something like that. Not since I've done 3 of these before now. In the past, often the executive director, the interim executive director is part of the selection committee. So for example, Bernie Kernstein was a part of the prior executive committee. I think Penny, you were around for this time. So back then, I believe our selection committee was Karen Huey and Scott Brightman, and Helen Gergosian was on it. And do you remember who else? It was fairly small, so it could be, work efficiently here. So.
What I don't remember is being able to see all the resumes of the, and maybe I did, but I don't remember seeing the resumes, and I've been reading this hiring regulations from DHCD, and
Well,
as a board, we're supposed to be able to.
I did dredge up some emails, and I haven't gotten them all dredged up back from there, but there was a email, where did it go here? From where basically all the candidate, that sort of getting, not at the initial, when they're getting hundreds of paper copies in and there's that initial screening. But what we did at the board meeting last time around is the board received regular updates of when you got down to a list of 6 or 10, the evaluations and so forth. So the sort of board information as we go along. And then if there was a desire for the board, the board absolutely, if the board desires to be part of any it's or anything at the earlier stages, there's no prohibition against that. It's not like, it's not, it just means you have to plan at least 2 days in advance and make sure that every single selection committee meeting is posted where there's, a quorum of the board that might be attending. Any other thoughts or comments?
Well, I think the job posting has to take place quite quickly, right? And has to be up for at least 2 weeks.
Right. And so that was one thing I was going to bring out. Actually, what I thought would be useful for us today is to go through that first notice that we received from Bob Pelletier, DHCD, which lays out the process. And one of the things obviously is the job description, which says it can be the standard GHCD job description, or it can be, an LHA job description as long as it incorporates the minimums from DHCD. And so it occurs to me, and I'm skipping ahead from what I thought we could do, that we may want to all have a chance to look over our latest version, which is the one that was used to hire Angie, and look at the DHCD one, and then at our meeting next week, decide on a final job description that would, then be posted. If that sounds like a good approach, I can start walking through this document, and we can pause at each step and comment on it and make action items for ourselves, or either make decisions, as the case may be. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
Okay.
Is this going to be done in without the public? Is this going to be done in executive session?
No, basically all the hiring has to be done in open session. And I will cover that. There's a section on the document. I'm just going to start screen share here. And that's one of the things here. And let me do desktop now. Where'd it go? share. Everybody see that all right?
Mhm.
So this is the overarching, the latest overarching guidance memo, 2021-03, and all the other ones I sent out later this afternoon are all referenced in here. But this sort of lays out the entire process.
Reg, your screen is showing, it's just showing Zoom. It's not showing the document.
In the
Okay,
back of it though, I can see, but.
all right, let me stop the share
Look at that.
and let me go to that and let me start that again. Share. Does that work?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks. One thing that's changed, I can tell you from last time around, I haven't compared it to the previous thing here, but I've, is this broadening of the applicant pool here. That section is a whole new section about diversity that is, wasn't there before. And basically, if you go into the second page, it elaborates on that at the top here. And then you'll see in the later this afternoon materials that Bob Pelletier sent me. There's a lot of requirements for reaching out for minority candidates and being very proactive about diversity. So that's one first thing there. I call your attention to the interim executive director here. So speaking to Bob Pelletier, first of all, we're all extremely grateful that Angie is honoring her 2-month notice in her contract. So, we don't have an immediate issue of emergency here, but the HCD, is expecting us to hire an interim executive director because the typical search takes about 6 months to 9 months elapsed time between the time you start advertising and the minimum advertising periods, then getting candidates in and collecting the, evaluating them in the search committee meetings and, more candidates, and then, everything bubbling up to the board decision. And then, even after the board makes a decision, you have to negotiate the contract with the, chosen candidate. And then once that's accepted and signed, that person gives another 2 months notice. So, it's easy, for 6 months minimum to go by that kind of process. And for example, it took us about 8 months from start to finish. The start was when Bernie Kernstein joined us and Paul Dumochel announced his resignation to May 1st, 2019, when Angie came on board. So one of the things we face here is not only a permanent executive director search, but an interim, finding an interim as well. Another thing I would also point out here is board members technically can step in as interim executive directors, but they can't get paid for it. So I'm not sure. Yeah, I think that wouldn't, yeah. And that's, they down and deeper in the email, they cite the conflict of interest and ethics laws, regulations has to do that. And then, when you appoint a new executive director, they go through a whole set of requirements, which is, first of all, there has to be a final job description, that is used for the posting. And we can either use their standard job description, which is Exhibit B in this memo, or we can use our own current one, or we can, take a look at our own current one and revise it. And as long as it includes the DHCD minimums, we can use that one. And we have to, and we would have to send that to DHCD to get them to approve our version here. So that is, I flagged that here just in my notes as something to come back to, that we may want to set ourselves the objective of deciding next week, next Thursday, what that, whether our current job description is fine or whether there's any changes needed to it. Let me pause there. Does any comments that anybody has on that? Otherwise, I'm going to just keep chugging through here.
I just have a question about the interim. So
Yes.
what is the process for hiring the interim?
The process is one or of two or three things. Number one is you put out an alert through your network of contacts. So for example, we could, put an alert out through Cambridge Housing Authority's network of contacts. Angie could do that as well through her network of contacts. I can do that with my network of contacts, looking for people who would be interested in a 6 to 9 month temporary gig as an interim executive director, obviously with qualifications as close as possible, matching a permanent executive director. I did ask DHCD this morning whether at one point in the past they maintained a list of interim executive directors that you could check in with. And apparently that list doesn't exist anymore. And unfortunately, the reason is that there's a scarcity of good people, and more demand than there are good people. A third way to do it is if we hire a search consultant, we can make as part of that search consultant's initial job is to locate some interim executive director candidates for us. And, we basically have until 2 months. And Angie, if it's okay for me to say this, Angie has extended her deadline, not deadline, but her last day, an extra half a week to the end of that first week in May. So it goes to May 3rd, I think, if I've got that date right. But that amount of time is going to go very quickly. And, getting an interim executive director is probably our biggest, most urgent, immediate task. So things keep running smoothly here. And we have, for a small local housing authority, we have a lot of complexity. We have state program, we have federal programs, we have Section 8 vouchers, and Matthew House. So a lot of complexity there. So any other questions? And I'll just keep scrolling through this here. So there's a whole section on here, minimum qualifications. They have to meet the minimum qualifications. It must be approved by DHCD. And candidates also, at some point in the process, have to go through a query check. But of course, you don't do that with all the sort of initial candidates the screening committee might be looking for. But before you get to the final meeting with the board, that has to be done for obvious reasons here. We know we have a fair amount of familiarity with the compensation guidelines, so that we're strictly limited to what DHCD has published in that area. Then this is down the road in the process. There has to be a written employment agreement. And I'm just got somebody else to admit here. If it's a new executive director, never been one before, you can do a 1-year contract. If it's an experienced executive director, you can do up to 3 years of an employment contract. And then there's this whole section 5 is a method of applying. And there's all these requirements for posting at various different places and for various different lengths of time. Whatever we post by way of an application, I'm sorry, not an application, but a notice must be required by, reviewed by DHCD in advance, and they have a 5-day turnaround deadline, but that adds another week to the delay on anything here. And then, a whole additional, I guess I was speaking to the advertisement, but here, this section has been very substantially beefed up to emphasize diversity. So there are, they're looking for significant efforts on the part of the search committee and the search consultant to search out minority candidates. And then at the bottom of this page, interestingly, is their definition of what minority is in the footnote, which I must say, what I found very interesting, because, even though I've thought of our current executive director as a minority, it's not, that person is not on this list. So, yeah, that's what we got to work with. So, we've got to advertise in all of these areas here to make sure that potential minority candidates find out about the job opportunity. And then there's the selection committee section. So you've already mostly asked the questions about that. But it's got to be consistent with the tenant participation regulation. And that applies on the federal side as well. And they spells out LTO involvement in examining the resumes and interviewing and recommending and so forth before it gets to the board. Then they go into back and say, okay, the first step is, there's, there will be maybe a flood or a trickle of paper applications coming in as a result of all these advertising outreach efforts, and that has to be screened. Typically, that's never been done by the screening committee because it's too overwhelming. It's sort of something where you need to hire a professional to do that for you. And, one of the things we're going to have to do is make a decision to do that and authorize the funds for that. Then typically that search consultant, weeds out all but the dozen best candidates, 10 or 20 best candidates. And then the next step in the DHC process is a in-person interviews by the search committee. And again, part of the reason that you don't have the whole board on the search committee, and part of which reason that you're looking for people who are willing to put the time in, and not everybody can do this. A lot of people have other jobs or other commitments, because when you interview 10 or 20 candidates, you're talking about 10 or 20 hours worth of interview time if you're even doing only an hour interview. And often I found an hour isn't long enough to kind of really assess a candidate. And you can't do them all in one day. You've got to do them 2 or 3 per day over a 2 or 3 week period, because if you do too many interviews in one day, everybody starts blending together. There's just a sort of a limit of how many interviews can be done. And of course, then there's scheduling issues as well, finding those dates and times when the selection committee can get together. So those are all factors we have to take into account in appointing a selection committee. And then, once the selection committee kind of whittles it down to maybe the top 5 or top 3 or top 2, then before it goes to the board, there has to be background checks and reference checks and other considerations. I guess that refers to physical examination. That's something new that wasn't there before. But I guess, if there's a issue of the candidates, who otherwise qualified candidates' physical ability to do the job, there's some provision here I hadn't seen in prior sets of guidances having to do with that. And then you finally get around to board appointments. So we're now 6 to 9 months down the road. And the recommendation, of the selection committee can be, a single selection or a minimal number of finalists, like probably not more than 3, probably ranked, with a recommendation document, and the resume and all that information that the board would need to make a decision. And then they're presented to the board, meaning they attend and typically there's been, to the extent, especially if there'd been board members that haven't been involved before now, there's a whole full-fledged board interview that takes place. And then here's the question that was asked by Janet. Hiring of executive director cannot take place in executive session. And then there's a vote. And then once there is a vote, there is the execution of the contract. Typically, if there's one, top finalist, as part of the selection process, the selection committee has already, with the help of the search consultant, already had discussions about the employment contract. So when the board is voting, they're voting knowing that
Okay, sure, no worries.
yeah, sorry about that. And then once the board makes its decision and the winning candidate signs the contract, it has to be reviewed by DHC. It's not official until they've done their review, and we've submitted to them, a summary of the process, copies of all the advertisements that were done, resumes, of the selected candidate. Let's see if I can make this work here. That's not working. There. All the finalists and the selected candidate. And then the salaries, there's salary worksheets that have to be done, an extract of the minutes of the meeting when the vote was taken. And, the contracts, 3 copies, and the job description and the certification page they require, and their mandatory cover sheet. And those items are in that second email from DHCD I sent you earlier this afternoon.
Reg, actually, I didn't see stuff attached to that, the second email.
Really?
I didn't either.
Yeah, nor I.
Okay. Then
Me neither.
let me thank you for saying that. Here it comes. We need to please Penny, Ed, Janet, Angie. Again, as I said in my cover email here, which I'm not going to copy, I'm just going to say resend. Even if they had called me back on Monday morning, this is way too much information to sort of take in, other than for the purposes of this planning meeting that we're doing here. So, so the purpose of this is get everybody's heads wrapped around what the process is, and at least get some initial questions out. So that should be in your inbox. It goes on, if state again that it's there's conflict. You could appoint a board member. Let's say you wanted to I'll pick on me. If you wanted to appoint me as a executive director, you cannot until I've not been a board member for 1 year. So I guess we could appoint Peter Pingator or Scott Brightman or one of the prior board members, but you're not eligible to be appointed unless you've already left the board for at least 1 year here. So, and then in Exhibit A, it gives us executive director qualifications for, these are minimum qualifications for, apply to all for required, working hours, which in our case is full-time. Education can be substituted for experience, and it shows how many years, like 4, how many years substitute. And then again, I'm not trying to get everybody to read this, but just kind of give an orientation. And the most important section here is, the medium housing authority section. This is the category that we fit into, 200 to 499 units. And this is the minimum required to hire anybody as an executive director. And skipping past the large and very large housing authorities, then in Exhibit B here is their standard job description, which we have not used ever, as long as I've been around. We've always had our version. The previous version we had, had been approved by DHCD. And I will be sending that around in the board packet on Friday for next week's meeting. But you can take a look at that. And I believe you've all received our job description, and that was in Angie's contract before. So you probably have a good idea what's already in there. But I'll try to get that all assembled, be a little bit more less in scramble mode by the time we get to the regular monthly meeting on March 17th. So that's kind of the process. And the time frame. So that's B4 on the agenda. And I want B5 is impact, on the day-to-day operations. That is there anything we need to ask Angie if there's anything we need to worry about, et cetera. And then impact on the modernization development initiative, which we'll do after that. But first, as far as the process is concerned, let me come off a screen share here. And does anybody have any comments? None. So let me go to my notes from my.
Penny has a comment.
Okay, go ahead, Penny. Speak up. Sorry.
Question on page 5 of that hiring process.
Yes.
Number 11 says that the selection committee's recommendation should be the recommended candidate's resume, the date of the candidate's availability, and the salary proposed. It doesn't say that the board would be able to see the recommendations submitted to the candidate or for the candidate. And I would think that would be important.
I don't know why that wouldn't, that's public information once we get it. So yes,
Okay.
what has typically been happening, what's typically happened is the search consultant is the one that does the the interviews of recommendors. You might have noticed earlier, I skipped over it, Penny, but since you had a chance to read this, that one of the steps is that you have to come up with a set of standard questions for each candidate makes sense. And those standard questions are used not only for actually the selection committee doing the interviews, so the in-person interviews that they do, but there's another set of standard questions that are asked of the recommendors for each candidates. So you get apples to apples answers across everybody. And then what happens is the search consultant again spends some time and some of our consultant money summarizing those interviews so that we have a nice, first the selection committee and then us have a nice concise summary, but there's no reason why you can't have access to, I guess, the specific notes, I would think. You'd certainly have access to everything that went before the search committee here.
Good. Well, it's not written there, but it is recorded here. So
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, no, it's not prohibited, and it's common that obviously the board wants to know a lot about what the recommenders had to say. Yeah, go ahead, Ed.
Does DHCD have a set of standard interview questions?
No, and they don't ask us to submit ours for approval.
Okay.
But I do think that the board should be interested in seeing what those standard interview questions are and commenting, have a role in making sure that all of the questions are being asked of the candidates.
I would like to suggest that the board at the earliest convenience of everyone, submit recommended questions.
Right, let me make a note on that. Does everybody think Ed has a good idea there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let me just note in red pen, Ed. All right. Uh, what has happened in the past also is if you hire a good search consultant, they already have this already done. We don't have to like use a blank sheet of paper. And so what they typically do is give it to us and we then can comment on it and say, hey, we want to ask about something else.
Okay.
Like, have you had any experience with after school programs, just to take a guess at what might be an interesting a question we're interested in adding, or that kind of thing. So I think, again, I'm going to run through these notes I've been taking as we've gone along, but is there any other comments? Before I just do my readout from my conversation with Bob Pelletier this morning, or shall I'll go to that. Okay. The first thing he brought up and we discussed, is we really should hire a search consultant. And THCD has 2 approved search consultants they would like us to use. Although again, we're not prohibited from using somebody else. And the 2 of them are the person that the firm we used before, Rich Lico. The second person is somebody I haven't heard before, Pat Grace. And Bob sent me contact information. We already have Rich Lico, but for Pat Grace. And one of the things I think needs to probably happen is to reach out to her and find out more information for our next week's board meeting, and find out what her terms are. I also went back and found a document from Bernie Kirstein. Let me see if I can bring that window up. Where he identified half a dozen search consultants that we interviewed last time around. And it's not coming up where it needs to. Why is that?
If Bob Pelletier has recommended 2 people,
Yeah.
Perhaps we don't need to complicate it, just take his suggestions.
Well, what do you folks, all of you think about that?
I'd like
Now-
to know something about Pat Grace.
Yeah.
We know about both of them.
Yeah, and we have had a lot of experience with Rich Lico as well. So we can contact him, but I'm not sure we need to interview him again necessarily. But we maybe should contact both of them if that's their suggestion. And if you want to, I'm sorry, I tried to have this already this afternoon, but it's been a mad scramble. I will send out the identities of the other. There's a table that Bernie Kernstein gave to the board, back in when Penny in my days earlier here. I'll send that around and I can reach out to the other ones and see if they're still in business. There's a woman named Judy Weber that's very good that we wanted to use back then, but she didn't have enough time for us. And I think the goal there is to come back to the board meeting next Thursday and say, here's what we know so far about search consultants who are available. And if everybody's okay with me doing that, then I'll do that. Yes.
If I remember correctly, you stated that Bob Pelletier indicated he wanted us to work. He preferred that we work with one of those two that he
Yes.
suggested.
Yes,
If- If that's the statement, I think cooperating with them is going to make our life easier.
it's whatever the will of the board is. So everybody else, is that our sense of the board for now? At least start there.
I wanted to ask, at one point there was an interim director, her name was Rita, and I can't remember her last name. But she was wonderful, and she started her own business, and I'm not sure what that business was. Was she, is she a consultant?
So that was before my time, but if you have contact information, next thing I was going to bring up is, we the interim executive director. So if you could send me that contact information or at least the last name, I can see what I can dredge up there. But we should, I've run across people in the past who do this work just in the course of doing the modernization redevelopment initiative. So with the board's consent, I will reach out to everybody I know and get suggestions. And I already had a meeting with the Cambridge Housing Authority earlier today because I wanted to report on what their opinion of the situation is when we get to agenda item B6. And they are most willing to work their network on our behalf for first an interim director, and then any hidden candidates, for the permanent position would be funneled through our search consultant. Let's say it's Pat Grace or Rick Lico. So what I'm hearing of is let's just go with them for now and report in next Thursday. Is that the sense of the board? Okay, let me make some notes. That sort of does the interim and the permanent new director. Also, just to speak to a question that might be on some people's mind, and we recently did bring on an assistant executive director, Cheryl Gosman, as we all know. And whether or not she is interested in this, I do not know. But we would have to. If she is somehow interested in the job, she would have to become a candidate and go through this process I just outlined with the search committee and the LTOs and leading up to a board decision. So, right now, she does not meet the qualifications for an interim executive director because there's a whole bunch of on-the-job learning that she's interested in doing and taking courses, on all those things in the day-to-day operations that I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting. But that's not something you can do in 2 months. It's more like 2 years, even on a very fast track basis. So, anything else on B1 through B4, interim executive director, permanent new executive director, formation of the search committee, the process and the timetable? So I'm going to now go to impact on day-to-day operations. And Angie, I'm going to ask you if you would unmute yourself.
Reg, I have a question. Why am I not being seen in the galley?
I don't know. You mean seen in your video? Why is your
Yeah.
video?
I can't see anybody.
Janice was on before.
And
I know, but I'm not now.
let me see if I can send you a request.
None of the other attendees are visible.
Yeah, but that's because there's a setting that I put them on that way. When we get to resident comment, I'll undo the setting. But let me see, let me ask.
Yeah, I'm with the attendees, looks
No,
like.
no, we're all attendees today. Let me, here, wait, I've got to find the right setting here. Why is this not working here?
Reg, wouldn't you just go on to the list where she's listed and then click on the camera?
I'm doing that, but it's not doing anything here. Yeah,
Is it on your iPad? Is it you, Janice, that needs to turn it on?
maybe.
No, I looked at everything a couple of different times. It's been like for the last 20 minutes.
Yeah,
So it doesn't show you a video at the bottom of your screen?
No, it
Click on.
just shows a head and a body.
let me try one thing. So Janice, now try to turn on your video. There we
Oh,
go.
there
Okay.
you are.
There I am.
I don't usually use this interface, so I'm sort of fumbling my way around here.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. Yeah, don't turn it off because that's probably what happened. You may have turned it off briefly and you couldn't turn it back on. All right. So Angie, again, I'm speaking for myself, but hopefully for the whole board, I really appreciate your, hanging in there for a couple of months and giving us a time to get our act together. But obviously we've got a lot of balls in the air on a day-to-day operations basis. And, with our move and everything else, is there anything that you need to tell the board that we should be concerned or worried about, just on the trains running on time, mission number one, running a smooth operation here?
Yeah, that will continue the next 2 months. Angel and Deb will finish off the rest of the month. They're done, I think March 31st they'll be done. And I'll just continue, running it smoothly and making sure everything is reported on time as usual, like I have been. And that's it.
Does anybody have questions? Any? Yeah.
I thought Deb was becoming the service something else. And I thought Angel was becoming a PR person.
You
Right,
have, so I've told you several times, Penny, that no, but you continue saying that that's what I said. No, I posted a full-time job for a resident service coordinator. I've said that to you several times.
I know that.
Okay, so then I don't know why you keep going back to Deb being.
Come on,
full-time.
I know this is a.
It's just that they're going to be done at the end of the month. And then I will make sure that I continue doing the reporting as I usually do. And hopefully you all will find an interim in the meantime.
Well, will we be able to start interviewing candidates in the next couple of months? Because this is an important position to fill here. That's a question for you, Andy. Yeah.
Oh, it's been posted. No one's applying for it.
All right. So I think that's maybe an area of concern, is hopefully getting some candidates there. So any other areas of concern that or questions that board members have? Okay, so resident services coordinator. All right, that brings us to impact on the modernization and redevelopment initiative. And as I mentioned in my transmittal email, I was given a heads up by the chair of the CPC that I'm going to be asked about that tonight. I did a meeting with Cambridge Housing Authority earlier today, and asked them for their opinion on that, and also their opinion on the Charles River Center letter as well. And so we'll get to that later, Charles River Center letter. But they said, in their opinion, that for now, if we, we got stable operations through to May 3rd. We got a good interim director on board. We're sort of in a period which does not require a lot of time on the part of our staff, meaning, executive director, leadership, or other staff members, because they're basically doing those studies for the repositioning that, hopefully will bring us millions of dollars more in. And, there will be sort of board decisions that will come about when they finish those studies and work those into that repositioning analysis. That probably is more in the June timeframe. And then, what we will be deciding based on their recommendations are which one of the 4 funding programs that, or a blend of them, makes sense for our particular situation. And, all of us will be relying on their recommendations in that area because it's so complex. And so it needs to make sense to the board and the interim executive director, but it's not something like we're going to be doing, ourselves. We're not going to be doing anything other than the work to leading us to submit the applications for the funding. And that has always been sort of scheduled for the fall timeframe. So we're kind of on schedule doing that. And what we have as a situation of transition probably won't affect the High Rock, the Seabeds, Cook, and High Rock Homes repositioning, all the way through the submission of those applications. And in fact, it doesn't, the transition situation does not become a problem for those initiatives until we get to the spring of 2023, because on our schedule we have right now, spring of 2023 is when we would at the earliest sort of start doing these renovation projects for Seabeds and Cook. And we would also be making steps forward for High Rock Homes, but those wouldn't be done first because those are redevelopment. So we need to find more money for that. The other thing she said is that in part, as she understood, this is why we hired the Cambridge Housing Authority, which is to have a team, outsourced team that could continue, when we have the ups and downs of a small housing authority, which is pretty much what we've had for the last 10 years. That's been hard to get around here. And what else did they say? The last thing you said is one of the criteria that you might want to consider changing the job description, since we have the modernization and redevelopment initiative going, is beefing up whatever is in there today, which I don't think is much of anything, because the kind of person that we would want to come on board as our new executive director is somebody who really can enthusiastically support that initiative. So that was the other comment she had. Go ahead, Ed.
Are you in a position and or willing to take over as the liaison to the Cambridge Housing for the initiative?
Yes.
Okay. Then
Again,
I would certainly support having you take that responsibility because you're already deeply involved.
right. No, I can do that. I can bring in, as I always have, our staff as necessary. But I think, obviously that shouldn't be a permanent position for me. ideally, it would be something that the new executive director would shoulder, especially as we start getting into the actually getting some stuff done, the construction phase of stuff. So that's the answer on the repositioning of the Linden Chambers is the other big thing we have going right now. As I reported last week, very strong support in the CPC for that. For all the reasons we know. Basically the time frame, we need to get that designer selection committee appointed next week, which we were planning to do anyway. And won't talk about it now, but I've been making some progress getting some name suggestions for that, for the architect engineer that we have to have. And then there's a 2 to 3 month period of getting DHCD approvals, putting the RFP out on the street. Actually, it's RFS, request for services, waiting a month to get proposals back in, evaluating the proposals for another month, and picking the final winning bidder, which is, ultimately done by the board. So we're looking at midsummer before that's likely to just select somebody. And then another month of delay getting up and running. And then she said, and she's going to think about this some more. Obviously, this was all a surprise to her this morning as well. And they can probably give us some more formal advice than just me reading off my notes. But she said that after that, there's no reason that some of the initial stages of the Linden Chambers project with them, this consultant, this AE firm, wouldn't begin because they would be mostly zoning related. The first thing you have to do is figure out what kind of zoning changes you need to make, and then get first planning board and planning department buy into those zoning changes. And at the very fastest, if we do everything perfectly, we may have a chance of getting those zoning changes onto spring 2023 town meeting. But there's not going to be, hugely significant schematic design activities being done that's cost a lot of money to do, unless there's a pretty good sense that the town is willing to make the zoning changes that we would need, which we don't have those requirements. We don't have that by right in the chambers where the 8-acre property is located. So, that's a slightly long-winded way of saying that she doesn't think that we need to pause or do anything dramatic at this time about the Linden Chambers redevelopment, when that's 1.386 million now. It's just been, upped a little bit on strong support on the CPC. We are clearly going to be asked as a board to be pretty public about, enthusiastic support for this continuing to go forward. Again, we can get more information, maybe have Margaret attend one of our meetings, but no reason to interrupt the momentum that we build up, finally interrupted at this point. And that she thinks that can be explained to the CPC, and ultimately we'll have to explain it to town meeting. If we have a good interim executive director on board and all the trains are running on time by the time we get to town meeting, which we sort of need to do anyway, then that will also help, of course, as well. Any comments or questions about that readout from Margaret? Let me see if I missed anything here. I mentioned already, I asked her for any and all recommendations for an interim ED, and also any and all recommendations for a permanent, it's for a search consultant, as well as for the permanent ED. Any thoughts, questions, comments? Okay. All right. So we have two more things left to do. One is I think just it logically goes with this agenda item. The letter from CRC. And so let me give a little background on that. So right from day one, a year ago, when we became interested in doing this, and we've been tracking this property for 2 or 3 years. We've always known that the entities besides ourselves that might be interested in it are the Charles River Center, Babson University, and a developer who would, basically develop 3 1+1 acre McMansion high-end housing units, up on that property. And it's beautiful up there. If nobody's been up there, it's just gorgeous up on the hill. It's really very tranquil, surrounded by forests and Babson land. And that land was, Babson's interested in it because, has stated a mild interest in it from time to time over the last couple of 3 years, because it used to be their land. It was taken by eminent domain by the federal government when they built the Nike site back in the 50s. Nobody's really quite clear on what Babson's intentions are. We basically threw our hat into the ring with our CPA application in December. And we've had up until recently just extremely off the record informal contact with CRC. And we've had only one meeting that I would characterize as any kind of a brainstorming session. And that was on March 25th, but nothing has come out of that. There is no update for our board out of that. There's no update for the CPC or anything. There was just sort of the concepts. And then as we approach the CPC meeting tonight and approach the public hearing, next Wednesday, the CRC board took the decision to write the letter that you had a chance to take a look at when I sent it to you earlier today. So that's the situation. There is nothing, there's no any inkling of a deal yet or any other sort of thing right now. And if there was, the most that could be done is to, discuss it and then bring it to the board for discussion in an executive session, because we would be negotiating with another entity, but we're not at the point of having anything to discuss at all at this point. And the fact that they're very interested in this property is absolutely no surprise to me. This is, it's right across the street from their 6-acre campus there. And I think it's more than 6 acres if you count the Grogan Center down the hill. They've been there since the long time and doing wonderful things. So, if I were on their board, I would be plenty interested in that property as well. I have expressed the opinion when asked on occasion on our behalf that I think we all have a common goal of not having a developer buy this, but I don't think different town entities should be, competing with each other to try to acquire the property. We should try to work together, but nothing has been worked out to define what that means. And so the letter came in yesterday afternoon and I sent it to you as soon as I noticed it in my email box. So that's the situation. I'm going to be asked, tonight, what is the sense of the Needham Housing Authority board? And you can help me, you tell me what that is. And it can be as much as saying, I'm not sure yet, want to think about it some more, so, because it is fairly sudden. It's not really truly on the agenda for tonight. Go ahead, Ed.
I have heard that the center is interested in purchasing the property and leasing it to us. Is there any validity to that?
Well, I really can't comment on that one way or the other because, but I wouldn't certainly, that's one of the things that was discussed maybe on the brainstorming session, but I don't want to get into things any more specifically than now, because there is really nothing. But, one of the things we can do is schedule an executive session next Thursday. And I can be probably more candid and forthcoming. But, in terms of this open meeting, there's no, not even very preliminary wisps of something that is mature enough to discuss, even an executive session for us, let alone in the public meeting here. I hope I'm not being too evasive here, but literally we don't have.
That's fine. That answers my question for the
Yeah.
moment.
Right. I can say, of all the things we're doing, the 4 applications we have in, or let's say the 3 applications plus the, assistant executive director position, they've all had strong support from the CPC, lesser so, more middling support for the East Militia Road thing. So the CPC members may have something to say about this tonight. And then I will also say that, I get approached all the time by people advocates of deeply affordable housing saying, they think this is a really important opportunity for deeply affordable housing. We have the public hearing coming up next Wednesday, the 16th. Starting tonight, and obviously at that public hearing, the existence of this letter and the interest that's been expressed will be part of tonight's meeting and next Wednesday's. There's an avenue down which one can imagine that we should be withdrawing our application, but that's really not for me to decide by myself. It's really a complete board decision. And again, very sudden. All of you are hearing about this for the very first time, literally less than 24 hours ago. So it's okay to, there isn't a huge rush to make it, and I'm not asking for a final decision now about anything. And it wasn't even on the agenda tonight, as you know, so probably shouldn't be making any kind of decisions about anything. But if there's a sense of the board that anybody has, or sense of an individual commissioner about this, that you want to give me, I will carry it into tonight's meeting at the CPC. Penny, you're on mute though, so let me, and I've got to unmute you here, the way the system works here. So you should be getting an unmute request here. No? All right. So
Okay.
something's wrong. Oh, there you go. All right. Go
I'm
ahead.
very impressed with that property. We did take a ride up there. It's gorgeous. And I thought it was a wonderful opportunity for Needham housing, until I knew just this afternoon that Charles River is interested. It's adjacent to them, and they do wonderful work. So I'm, I guess you'd say, beginning to lean towards Charles River.
Okay. Anybody else? I will, maybe let me frame it this way. What I've always said, because this has been floating around in the background for months, is that we fully support the mission of the Charles River Center. They serve a class of individuals and clients who are not the same as ours, but very similar to what we do. We are helping people who are in really of need of help and deserving of help, make for better lives and make for better housing in our case. And so, we absolutely are interested in anything that makes sense to both boards for working together, and would encourage any discussions that may have started on an embryonic basis to continue or something like that. Does that sound like the kind of right sense for the board? I see head nods around.
Yes.
Here. Good. And, I'm comfortable. And, we've met with their board chair and their executive director. And I'm comfortable, I've known the organization for decades, back to the beginning, not because I participate, but just because actually my first job out of college was for the Department of Mental Health, back in the dawn of Charles River Center. It's something that is very much consistent with what we believe in on this board here. So, okay, so enough said on that. Let me also then say, unless any commissioners have anything else, I'm going to open the floor to resident input if I can figure out how to do it, or any public input here. So let me find the right setting here. Close that. Go to this. And all right. So why don't we do our usual protocol and ask if anybody has any comment to raise their hand. That should be working here. So I'm looking at the attendee list. Is there any NHA? Ed, I'm going to mute you there. Remember, okay, and Kalpana, you got there first. So we should be able to hear you and see you if you want to turn on your video.
Good afternoon.
We can hear you.
Thank you. My
Go ahead.
concern is that when you received the letter from NG about the resignation,
Yes.
did the board immediately accept it?
No, the board is meeting for the first time tonight. The board hasn't done anything like that. But we're assuming that she is resigning, and she's made it very clear that she is, yes.
It is always there that whoever gives the resignation intend very strongly to leave. But other part, I would say board is trying to retain the excellent person.
So I think that if I understand you, Kalpana, you say, has anybody or made an attempt to get Angie to change her mind, or is Angie declaring that her decision is final here? And I can speak for myself. I certainly made an attempt to change your mind, but Angie, I think that question is for you. Is your decision final here?
Yeah, unfortunately it is. I'm joining a high functioning board. It's a lot closer to home. So yeah, it's definitely, it's a definite resignation.
Okay.
And we should worry about that as you are leaving and then you are building the nice people. Recently we have as a staff also moving with you slowly, which has happened in the past.
No, I wouldn't do that, Kalpana. I wouldn't do that because of the residents. And I wouldn't take a job from someone else just to give it to someone I know. So no, no one who is currently working for Needham is coming with me.
Yes, right now no one is coming with you, but in past experience, with two executive directors who have made up their mind because of some kind of a, it's my reading. I might be wrong, but too much pressure from the board. And because of that, they have to kind of stressfully taking the or willingness to resign, then the better to take that stress. And then after we have NHA has lost a very nice people as soon as the executive has director has resigned. And that is my concern. Or does the residents have any input to have a meeting with NG, the last meeting, I suppose, as a resident and executive director meeting, and we can openly talk to her?
Yeah, that's fine. If you want me to, I can do that for you. That's not an issue.
Yeah, because now, see, previously, I would say 2 years, we were facing this pandemic, all kind of different restrictions, or so many things are going on still,
Yep.
and we could not meet you in person, like a meeting, a quarterly meeting, I must say. So I would like to have one meeting, resident and executive director, and we would like to hear from you. And if it is an open meeting, we can talk to you, whichever we feel to
Well,
keep you.
Kapana, I know, well, so here, well, Kapana, I appreciate it, but I don't think it's necessary to discuss why I'm leaving. I think it's, I'm getting closer to home, it's a shorter commute, so, I don't want to sit there and have a resident meeting to discuss why I'm leaving. I
No,
don't
no,
think
no,
it's.
no, not exactly, not exactly. But I would remind you that in the interview, you were the first candidate. You were the first candidate so willingly and enthusiastically accepted that, oh, I don't mind if I'm living so far. And reason, I would say last 15 years actively in the community as a community volunteer, it is little hard for me to digest.
Okay.
Well, this is Kalpana, this is a sudden new news for everybody. So we're
I understand, Mr. Reja. I understand totally, but
Yeah.
I'm just trying to.
Yeah, no, I think
Sorry.
I can think that, let's make this to be continued. Personally, I would be interested in having a farewell party for Angie, just to wish her Godspeed in her new gig here. But for now, let's just talk about the agendas items for tonight, which is really to make sure that we proceed forward with a good plan for finding first an interim executive director and then a permanent executive director replacement. So does any other residents have any comments or 2 cents they throw in? Go ahead, Sue.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I am kind of concerned. I know that Deb is now leaving at the end of the month, but we have so many people, both in families and in the seniors, that are in need of social service help. And I know that the social workers up at the CAF are inundated, with, people, because they serve the entire town. I would hope that if you get an applicant for her replacement, you might want to consider getting an assistant as well, especially for folks over here in our neighborhood. We don't have anybody like, I guess, Isabel that's over on Chambers Street. So I don't know what people are gonna do until you find someone else.
So
And
let me-
that is concerning to me.
So let me suggest that's a very, I'm concerned too. I think the board is concerned. And we can ask Angie and Deb to listen to that concern, and perhaps they can bring in next week, an updated report on looking for applicants. And then, of course, the other thing that comes to me on the interim is there a third-party contractor we can bring in to, sort of like an interim resident services director while we take the time to find a permanent person. So why don't we, add that to our agenda for next week and see what we have to work with. Does that make sense? Go ahead, Sue.
Yeah, one more thing is, and maybe you can ask Gary, because I know that there's an application for, a maintenance person, which we desperately, desperately need.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's a whole nother, issue that we've, is part of this whole job thing that's going on.
Well, can you ask him, ask him like you're going to ask Angie and Deb?
Yeah, Angie can report
Yeah, well,
on.
I already, actually, I'm in the midst of hiring that temporary kid, Jonathan, as a permanent employee. Remember, Brian is still on the books, so I'm
Yeah.
filling in Jonathan. So I'm hoping to make Jonathan permanent. That's in the process right now. So he'll be on the NHA team, and I know the residents love him. He's a great worker. So as far as that, we do have him as hopefully a permanent employee.
Is it too much of a confidentiality to find out how long Brian is gonna be on the books?
Yeah, I don't even know. I've
Okay.
asked the question several times, so it's a process, I guess.
Yeah,
Okay, any other resident input, please put your hand up. Go ahead, Ross.
But I am, hold on, sorry, 1 minute, 1 minute. But I am still looking for an additional temporary worker on top of the 3 guys now. So once I make Jonathan permanent, I'll bring in a temporary staff until we find out. the whole
Okay.
thing would. Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Ross.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm just refer briefly to a document. It's less than 2 months old. Rules of procedure, key objectives, compliance with mass open meeting laws.
Oh,
Yes.
Jesus.
No. So the reason I'm bringing that up is, due notice is important. There was kind of a scramble. There was a little mix up, but you think the notice went out, but a lot of people didn't get it. I did get informal notice, but then going to look for it, it wasn't there on the web page. So these
Well,
little things sort
I
of
just want-
slow things down. I want to make a point.
Can I just comment on that?
No,
Because we
please,
did-
no, you don't
We
need
did
to.
discuss
You
your
don't
point
need to.
at the
What I want to do
beginning.
is make a comment.
Yeah, I got it.
And yeah, I'm making a comment, Reggie, please let me continue. Thank you. When I was doing studying education, one of the techniques we used, the idea in the 70s was classroom without walls, but one of the ideas was to have an inner circle of people that were decision makers, participants in the discussion. And then there was an outer circle where people listened and watched. And then when they wanted to join, they elected to move to the inner circle. Well, the commissioners are part of the inner circle, but there's also an outer circle that are here. There are 10 other people in positions in government, residents that are interested. And we're the outer circle, and we can participate to a great extent. We just heard Sue and Angie talk about some issues, and we can help. Sue, especially somebody like her, is in a position to be very helpful. She's involved, she cares, and I think everybody else here is the same way. But when information goes around, letters to the board, and it's not included in a board package, and when in fact there's no board package, I can understand it's emergency. And I just need to say, better you than me. You're doing a great job, Reggie, handling this kind of an emergency. It's really terrific and very impressive. But the documents, I think, need to go out. A robocall 6 hours before the meeting, you know, that's just it's a good try to catch up. But and I'm not going to complain about this being an inadequate or in violation of open meeting laws or anything like that. But I think we just need to be more careful. Document 2021. I'd like, it'd be nice if I had that in my hands when you were reviewing it. And you sent it out this afternoon, you can just as easily send it out to everybody on a list, a distribution list, people that regularly ask for this information. We don't
Can
have
I
that.
interrupt now? Can I?
No, regarding Angie, if I may. Angie's been here almost 3 years. I think she has experience, she has expertise, and I'm hoping, Angie, that you'll consider this an opportunity and that we should, as housing authority people that are going to remain here, consider this a 60-day exit interview where you get to share what you've learned in this experience. I'm interested in learning what you've learned. I remember the very first days we were meeting together every 2 weeks, and then things happened and the pandemic and everything. And I kind of missed that. I felt like I was connected with the operation, and you were very open about your a lot of things. And I think that was healthy to build those kinds of relationships. And I hope you, you know, I hope you'll visit the residents, and we'll have some healthy meetings and share some information.
I want to respond to you, Ross.
Yeah.
Your letter, the Linden letter, please don't include me in your rhetoric saying the board have emailed and called each other when you have no knowledge of that. Okay? Don't
Well,
proceed,
So we're-
don't
we're- no,
proceed to
I'm-
bring me into your Linden
So-
letter. You
Well,
don't know me.
Can I interrupt now?
Well,
Ron?
allow me to respond to that, Reggie, please.
No, please,
I
Ron.
would want to know specifically, and we can communicate about that. But when I referred to the board, it doesn't necessarily
Ross.
refer to you,
Please, Ross.
Janet.
Yeah, it does.
Please, Ross.
Well, the board. Oh well.
I'm going to
Well, the
mute you,
board
Ross, if
speaks
you
for the
don't.
board, and if
So Ross, I've muted you because I've asked you several times not to speak. Now I'm going to unmute you, okay? So I can speak. Is that okay? You are now unmuted here. Go ahead. Yeah, no, I'm not. Let me just speak on this, okay? Ready? Here we go. So this is not a meeting for a dialogue like this to take place, and I want both Janice and Ross to stop doing that, please. This is a meeting about a very important transition that we got to get right. And it's critical to the future of the housing authority. And I would ask you two to take your discussion offline. And I want to say, acknowledge that there was a snafu. I'm posting the meeting, going back to your beginning of the comment, and I appreciate your noticing it. And you know, anytime you notice anything like that, you know, that helps us out, because I totally believe in the open meeting law regulations and so forth. That was just an error that was made. The materials, though, are all available to you. I will personally take responsibility for that, but I did not have them days ago. I just got them this afternoon. That's why I sent them out. So again, you know, we are all committed to our normal process of creating a board packet and sending it out in advance. And this time around, we just couldn't do it. Okay. So let me ask if there's any other comments from any other residents here.
no, excuse me. I have a couple of more points. That's all right.
Well, can you
The
do it
other
in a
things that
minute or
would-
so?
Yeah, the other things that would be of interest that should go around to the outer circle, if you will, not the commissioners, but the people that attend every meeting, that are on the LTO.
This
and
is
so
not
forth.
on our agenda tonight, is talking about an inner
Well, the
circle and
thing,
an outer
well, the reason
circle.
I bring
okay?
the,
So
the
is there
reason I
anything,
bring-
do you have anything to
Yep.
say about the topics on this agenda tonight?
yes, you
Hmm.
brought up the Charles River letter.
Yes.
Is,
Go ahead.
and is that going to be part of the minutes as they go out? And can that be
The-
something that goes around beforehand
Yeah,
in a
I
board
told you.
package with that?
I'll provide you a letter of that, after we finish the meeting or tomorrow here, okay? So
Yeah.
there's nothing, it's a public letter, it's public information. So just came in yesterday afternoon, so that's why it wasn't distributed in advance. So any other residents for comments? Otherwise, I think we're at the end of our agenda. I'm just going to pause here. I don't see any hands up. And we'll obviously be continuing, on all of these action items for next Thursday's meeting here. So I thank you all for attending this meeting and, short notice and to be continued. So I will go ahead and make a motion to adjourn. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second from Janice Bennett. All those in
Angie, I
favor?
want to wish you good luck.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Janice.
We wish you the best, Angie, and thank you for everything you've done. But from my point of view, especially for sticking it out another 2 months here, even if gas prices are going to become $8 a gallon, which is pretty scary to think about, given where you live here. So, okay, I'm going to call in a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, there are none. It carries unanimously 5-0. Have a nice evening, everybody. Thank you
Bye,
very much.
Reg. Bye,
Bye-bye.
Eleanor.
Bye, everyone.